Welcome to the Heat Beat Podcast. I'm your host, Giancarlo Navas, and with me today, producer and co-founder Brian Goins. What's up, Brian?
What's up, guys? How's it going?
You went in on the Heat Beat account yesterday. People thought that was me.
What do you mean? That was you. What are you talking about?
It really wasn't. I was feeling really not good yesterday, and you really held it down for the culture.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Chat loves you. Chat was angry. Chat's angry. Everybody's angry. On the bottom, it's Kenny Spence. What's up, Kenny?
What's going on, man? It's good to hear my name after the actual entrance music. I've been listening for so many years. Glad to be here.
That's what's up. Yeah, because
this is your first MHB pod. Yeah, I didn't realize it.
My first time on the main show.
Yeah.
We've done HOTS with Kenny, we've done WAPs with Kenny, and this is Kenny's first MHB. So welcome. You picked a good day because we're gonna slander the fuck out of some Jokic brothers.
Perfect day.
Just read your Twitter timeline from today. You'll be fine.
I don't even know.
I got to expound on some of that stuff because a lot of people just can't read. Apparently,
no.
So
they can't. Twitter's horrible. Kenny. So my big thing from yesterday is, Jokic and Morris are grown fucking men, right? So whatever they do to each other on the court, that's between them and that's between the players, right? That's for them. I'm not out here to legislate, whether Morris's cheap shot nobody fucking deserves to get hit in the spine and the back. That's one thing. And whether you believe the severity of the Morris foul or I don't give a fuck about that, right? For me, Kenny, it's the weirdos on fucking Twitter that are calling Jimmy Butler, of all people, a fake tough guy. You know what I mean? Calling UD a fake tough guy. Right? It's these people with dog avies, with Homer Simpson avies, with fuck like these weird camera angles where you can't even see their face. So all these, and
hold on. If we're gonna make fun of people with camera angles, we can't.
Me?
Come on.
Picture's good. I like my picture.
I meant currently you right now. Your camera angle's still terrible.
My camera angle's good on stream, but regardless, Kenny, it's a lot of people legislating Jimmy Butler's toughness, and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
So the thing that was interesting to me, because I saw that at first, and I was like, okay, people may not know what they're talking about. Then I saw people saying UD's fake tough and all this stuff, and so I'll give some perspective on that. I'm from the same neighborhood as you guys have some different eras, obviously, but to kind of really put it into perspective, UD grew up playing at Charles Hadley Park. That's on 50th Street and 13th Ave. I'm from 56th Street and 7th Ave. And so I have these people from Philadelphia and Canada and all these people saying, nah, UD's fake tough, whatever. But the thing you got to understand about that neighborhood specifically and other inner city Miami neighborhoods, there's no room to be a fake tough guy because somebody's going to test you on it. And if you fail that test, you're just not going to try it again. And so for UD to be 40 years old and not only still be outwardly aggressive towards people, but to still also, you have these stories floating around about Udonis hasn't getting guys out of jams and getting guys out of whatever the case may be. You can't buy your way into that here because everybody here went to high school with an NFL player. Nobody cares about the money. Nobody cares about the fame. If you have that kind of respect, you earned it. And so at a certain point, I'm seeing these people from these weird places saying UD's a fake tough guy, whatever the case is. And I just had to ask, where are y'all really from? Where are you from?
It's dudes, Kenny, like saying the Serbian hoods are different than like American and Miami. And I'm like, you been to Serbia? Dog, you doing missions in Serbia?
No, none of us knows anything about Serbia.
So especially not these white dudes from Denver. The fuck you know? The Rhino is the most urban shit you know. I've been to Denver. Like I know your little gentrified downtown Denver, your little Rhino area. I've been.
And that's
Shout out to Hop Alley. That's a good restaurant.
But yeah, like just people just have a real passion for speaking on things they don't know about. I think that's what it comes down to, because also like with me being from the place I'm from and these unwritten rules that exist in these places, just the idea of outwardly being scared of a guy's brothers, just out in public proudly and then trying to convince other people to be scared, that's such a foreign concept to me. I just can't even, like, even if you are scared for whatever reason, they haven't proven anything. You don't just run around telling people you're scared of people. And so I've been lost all day.
You can't do that and then start saying what a fake tough guy Jimmy Butler and Udonis Haslem are.
Yeah, like if we've seen Jimmy Butler do anything in his career, it's try to fight. Since like
literally somebody had a compilation.
Right. Like
and bigger dudes, right? It's like Nene, it's like bigger dudes than him.
And so it's him, it's UD especially, like I said, like you don't even have to know any real stories or details. You just know like him being from where he's from and having that respect earned. It's earned. We don't have to get into why. We don't have to get into how. Just understand it happens. Him being able to stop things from happening. Dolphins get robbed all the time.
I'm glad you're bringing this up.
And so, like, UD and Jimmy Butler being fake tough out of all people in the NBA, come on. There's no room for that.
So what Kenny's alluding to there is a while ago during the big 3 years, someone went to rob a house, right? And UD obviously lives in a nice house. Someone was doing a break-in, and when they realized it was UD's house, because they saw the pictures and shit in the house, they left. They don't want to fuck with that. You know what I mean? Like these armed people robbing this house are like, nope, never mind.
Yep. There was a story that UD shared on a podcast a few years ago where he talked about a story how Dwayne Wade, maybe during his like first 2 or 3 years in the league, he had a car jacked, and apparently in his car he had like a special like chain that he had. It was like super expensive, so he wanted that jewelry back. And apparently they were able to track the car, and apparently they were able to fact probably the jewelry from whatever pawn shop that ended up being sold to. And because of that, UD went up to D Wade and it was like, listen, I found your chain. Do you want me to go get it for you? And D Wade's like, yeah. I want to go get it. And then UD responds, but you do realize that if I go get this chain, however I get it is how I'm going to get it. And then D was like, no, I don't want that chain that bad anymore.
And Dwayne, by the way, Kenny, like, Dwayne's talked about the life where Dwayne grew up, right? Like Dwayne has mentioned, I would walk by dead bodies on the way to school. Like this is, like I said, people want to talk about, and again, like we're not out here to legislate, who has the worst ghettos, right? Or these, areas that are hit really hard. It's just like, it's just ridiculous to call these people not tough, or like, oh, well, they didn't grow up in war-torn, you know what I mean? Like,
and they did. I know for sure. It's like UD being from Liberty City in the 90s. I grew up in the 2000s. That's a war-torn ass place. And
literally,
so, like,
the police militarization in Miami, in those areas, in the 90s specifically, coming off the war on drugs. I mean, you can go look it up. It's there.
Yeah, like I don't understand this thing. Oh, well, they're from Serbia, so they're automatically tough. And they might be tough, but like, is that the best you can do?
It's ridiculous.
From this place, so come on.
And like I'm Kenny, and like the other thing is that I'm mad about is like people, and some people have brought it up in chat, and our chat's angry, and people are bringing it up.
Our chat is on fire.
Our chat is fucking bringing it. They're keeping the fucking energy. The thing I want to talk about as well is, Kenny, the way people are discussing this, general NBA people are like making fun of the Heat and by the way, we're the only ones who can make fun of the Heat. Okay. You guys fucking stay in your lane. We're going to make fun of them later because that picture of Andy Ellisberg is funny. We'll talk about that in a second. But like just general NBA people, defending Jokic, right? Like defending Jokic and then like besmirching Morris, but whatever. Morris did what he did. Again, I'm not here to legislate these two dudes and whatever they did, but like just general NBA Twitter just defending Jokic and not the other. It's weird to me. And Kenny, it feels, race motivated at times. A lot of white people, a lot of dog avies, a lot of Christian father first in the bio. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of that shit. And white men violence is always celebrated in a way that like, and the tweet was going around the other day. If Embiid did what Jokic did, people would want Embiid in prison. That's just fact, dude. Like that shit. Do you remember when Hassan got covered for trying to suplex Alex Len?
Yep.
Feels a lot different than what Jokic did. And Jokic is arguably just as bad. I mean, he hit a dude in the fucking spine. You know what I mean? And it's like, Kenny, this constant shit about how the media and people in the rest of the country look at our city, right? Kenny, I don't know about you, but I didn't grow up with like white Americans in my school, right? Everybody was Hispanic or Jamaican or Haitian or Dominican. Like I didn't grow up with white. I mean, Brian and I are white Hispanics, right? And obviously like there are like, not to make this a light-skinned opinions episode with Alf, but
I'm
I'm
the whitest half Colombian member.
Yeah,
so,
we didn't grow up with like white American people, right? And like our city is treated differently than other places, and I think this is just another way it manifests. And it reminded me of the Big Three Heat. And whenever this team is fucking good, A, people don't like to admit it, and B, they find any excuse to throw fucking rocks at us.
Except for Bobby Marks, JJ Redick, and Tim Legler. They all three of them, when the Heat win the championship, will get their own fucking championship float down Dwayne Wade Boulevard. My bad.
But yeah, Kenny, that's kind of like my thoughts on that shit. Like the glorification of these white men and their violence and how that's just framed against the Morris brothers and shit.
I want to talk about that too.
Well, what happens this next game in 3 weeks?
Hold on, I want to hear what Kenny says. Don't interrupt Kenny. You're canceled.
And so I saw the incident live. It took me a few hours to watch the replay again on video. And so I was wondering why that perspective was so skewed. And then I actually watched the clip. And so what happened is we saw it because we watched the game. Bam was in the post against Jokic. He gave him a shoulder, which is a normal post move. Jokic didn't like it. He swiped down on Bam's face. Bam is on the ground. That's when Markieff comes over and bumps Jokic. What happened is these NBA media people, they edited the first part out. And so it looks like Markieff Morris is just being crazy and Jokic is defending himself.
That's a great point. I
didn't like that part of it. And then I started to think of the reason for that. And so at first I thought, well, okay, Jokic, he's a star player. He's the best center in the NBA. They want to protect him for that reason. But then I thought about a few years ago, who was the best center in the NBA? 2015-16.
Dwight?
DeMarcus Cousins.
Yeah.
And so if DeMarcus Cousins threw his shoulder into somebody's back when they weren't looking, what would the coverage be like? Because if he pumped his fist too hard after a dunk, it was he needs to watch his temper. There's no place for that. He's a thug, quote unquote, this and that, whatever.
Yeah, and he's a cancer in the locker room is what his rep was pretty much the entire time in Sacramento.
Exactly. And so that's what made me realize exactly what this was about. Because if it was him in 2015 or it was Ron Artest in 2003, we just saw the Madison the Palace documentary about how that was covered and how it was racially motivated and all that stuff. And then like a month later, you had people cropping out what Jokic was guilty of to make it seem like this white guy was defending himself. And he's just this cuddly guy. Watch Markieff Morris doing this to him. And it's like, okay, like it's flagrant at this point. It's flagrant. And I'm not even like the conspiracy theory guy, but it's just so obvious you can't ignore it.
The way, and like, we get accused at Heat Beat a lot of times of making things about race, right? Whether it be Alf or me or whatever. And, like, I would tell the people saying that, why don't you listen to the people saying it, specifically the black men and women who do work with us, right? When they're saying it, maybe if you're white, maybe you should shut the fuck up and listen, right? It's not all about y'all, you know what I mean? So and it jumps out, and it's just the way that white players are covered and all that. And we don't have to overly get into that. I think we've said kind of enough, and I've certainly said my piece on Twitter. I know Kenny have as well, but it's just frustrating because it just repeatedly happens. And again, Miami was down a lot, so it looks bad. But Kenny brought up the great point of people said that the Markieff thing wasn't a basketball play. I mean, it kind of was a basketball play. The take foul in that situation with your center under the basket, after he got hit in the face by Jokic, which it's Morris A, protecting his guy, and B, taking a hard take foul,
and
because you don't
even that hard.
And yeah, I mean, whatever. And the game was over, so you could say there was no reason for you to do that, right? And I'm not out here defending Markieff Morris. Everybody knows I don't really like Markieff Morris that much. Like, this is not about that. It's just the escalation, the ridiculousness of all this, the way that it was covered, and just all of it. It's just all ridiculous. Which brings me to maybe my favorite part of the night, which is this picture of Andy Ellisberg. I don't even know what my favorite part. Jimmy looks like he wants to kill someone. I feel like they just made Kyle come. Like, Kyle had to come out of like an obligation. You know what I mean? Like, Kyle's like, man, if I don't show up, I'm new here. This is bad. Dedmon in the back with the towel. Dedmon had that towel over his head since like the third quarter. My man.
Interesting about that picture too. I don't know if you want to put it back up.
Put it back up.
Somebody pointed this out. I forgot who it was. I want to give credit. I forgot who it was. Like, because the story originally was that the Heat were being sought by Denver Nuggets security, but that's a championship ring right there.
That was
right there.
Let me see if I can find a caption. That way,
that's Andy, baby.
No, so like, clearly, like, you can look at that and see it's not the Denver Nuggets. They've been in the league since '76, never won shit. It's probably why their fans are so passionate and mad now, but that's beside the point. Point is, people are just dumb in general.
And the other thing, Kenny, is so Jimmy, people are like, why didn't Jimmy get into it? Why didn't Jimmy get into it when it happened? Jimmy was doing his job and running back on defense. Jimmy saw that Bam was down. I was like, shit, I gotta go defend. You know what I mean? So I feel like Jimmy didn't, until Jimmy, like, he just sees this dude down. He's like, wait, what happened? Looks at the replay and is like, oh, hell no. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what I was thinking. And everyone's like, the one who made the business decision was Tyler. And a lot of people have been making, I don't blame Tyler.
That's what you want Tyler to do.
No, yeah, Tyler, let's stay out of it. Like, no one's scared of you anyway. Like, you don't have to pretend you're tough. Just go go be in those songs with those people and wear your cool fashion and just shoot and do the serial thing. You don't have to fight.
But I'm glad you brought Jimmy up too, because I saw people saying he was a fake tough guy because he pretended when Jokic was already sitting down. So for one, we saw Jimmy's back was turned, he didn't see it. And another thing, which is why I'm glad you brought this up, Jimmy wasn't talking to Jokic. What happened is the players on the Denver Nuggets bench were like laughing and giving Jokic pounds, like, oh, good job, whatever the case is. That's when Jimmy got upset. It wasn't the foul. He didn't see the foul. And anybody in their right mind would get upset at that. Like, okay, whatever. Our teammate hit you. You hit him back. It was a little much, but fine. But now you're over there celebrating, and like, that's taking it way too far. That's what set Jimmy off. It wasn't the actual foul.
But no one's talking about that, Kenny. No one said shit.
Right.
Everyone's just calling Jimmy fake tough guy. They're calling the Morris brothers crazy. Oh, look, the Jokic brothers. They're so tough. You don't want any of that.
And none of the media is showing the Denver Nuggets bench laughing and celebrating, because the story has
the crowd
to be
chanting MVP.
Or chanting MVP.
Crowd chanting MVP. Because the story has to be the league MVP standing up for himself, the cuddly white guy defending himself against this quote-unquote thug.
He also hit poor Campaign in the face in the playoffs.
Campaign.
Dog, Campaign. Skinnier than you.
Who had nothing to do with the play, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, I think somebody just passed it to him, and Jokic went and did all that. And that's when people saw Jokic's brothers yelling from the stands along with 25,000 other people, and that's what made Jokic's brothers so tough.
Chad brings up a good point. A Nuggets coach put his hands on Jimmy too. That happened. That happened.
And apparently, because Jimmy pushed him back, because he kind of like got his hands off of him, that was the reason why he got the technical.
Oh, and that's the other thing. And Alf brought that up in Hangover Time. I mean, the fact that the fucking Morris, who nearly got stretchered out, also got ejected, a flagrant 2. The fuck was that?
Like, man, come on.
And you know, and we can use this as a transition point to the actual basketball that the Heat have played through 10 games, because there's a lot to get to there. But, you know, that game, and I don't do officiating stuff ever. If you've, you know, Kenny, you've been listening for a while. Brian and I have been doing this for almost 10 years. You know that I rarely do the officiating show. The refs.
I love the officiating show.
Yeah, I know you love it. I don't, because it's kind of a bullshit excuse. But when the game is so physical like that, and the refs let a lot of stuff go, especially under the basket with rebounding, you know, that's where a lot of the physicality happens. And part of the reason why that he got crushed on the boards, you know, was that a lot of, I think, you know, a lot of whistle swallowing, right? And that's kind of how the game gets out of hand, and you get to that point, and then the Heat were kind of crushed. I mean, they didn't play well either. I'm not saying that that's why they lost. It was just one of the reasons and all that. So hope Keefe is feeling better. Hope he can play. I mean, he's obviously been a bigger part of the rotation than I think any of us imagined, especially going into preseason. So shout out.
It sounds like he's fine, but they're still doing tests. But last word that we found out was from Coach Spo after the postgame during the postgame presser. He basically said that he was moving fine in the locker room. So
that's good.
In terms of him, like with his back injury, I don't think is anything severe to the point where he's going to be missing the rest of the season. I think he might miss a couple games. It'd probably be smart to sit him out these next 2 games, this back-to-back stretch against the LA teams. But
Tiana says he's out.
I don't think that's been confirmed, unless I can look it up.
Chad's saying Morris is out for tomorrow.
But before
we have to do what naturally we have to do to confirm news.
Okay,
Go to Ira.
Apparently he is out for tomorrow. I'm looking at a Barry Jackson article he just posted. So yes, he is out tomorrow because of whiplash. Apparently.
Could have been a lot worse.
I'll show you whiplash. This transition. We're gonna get into the Heat's offense now, from race to offense. I don't know. So Kenny, Brian, the Heat have been kind of weird on offense this season. They're not shooting the ball really well. Duncan's obviously struggling. Their half-court offense was really good 5 games in. We're down to like 17th in half-court offense. Right, which is going to be, I think, to me, one of the biggest indicators on how this team's going to look. He Lifer says, "Ayo, whiplash fucks you up." I'm sorry, that was funny. You know, there were so many funny comments while we were having serious conversations. Schmied and Solnick said something about the V in my shirt about to pop out. It was. I had to like not laugh because I was dying. Y'all heard something else. Speaking of fighting, that collar on G's shirt is fighting for his life right now. Bro, can someone give Brian a picture frame or something as a decor of an abandoned building? Yeah, we got to give Brian some stuff.
Wait, I got a lot of stuff to hang, but
Brian
I'm a little too scared to put any nails in my wall right now until I actually like plan out what I want to put up.
Leave Brian alone. Brian just moved into the new house.
I need to invest in some command hooks is what I need to do.
So Heat are 17th in half court offense. You know, I think that's about what I think any of us could expect, especially if their shooting is not going to be good. 6th in transition offense. So that's obviously really good. And the Heat are just 3rd in offensive rating in general. Yeehaw, good for them, right? So they've somehow managed to have a good offense. Their offense is actually better than their defense. Their defense is 6th now. Their offense is 3rd. So they're doing a really good job on that end. Kenny, that's been kind of the weird thing. And I guess we can start branching out to other things first, but like the fact that the half court that their transition offense has been so good and has fueled, I guess it's not a surprise considering what we've seen, but do you think that's sustainable for them? Like what do we have here?
It's going to have to be. And I think it is because their defense is so like incredible on most nights. Obviously last night, I don't know what happened, but they're going to have to score off of defensive plays. They're going to have to get deflections. They're going to have to get these things. And it's great to see that because last year they had nobody who can push on a fast break.
Yeah.
And so they're going to have to continue with that at least until Duncan gets his shot back, at least until PJ's been fine. I haven't looked at the numbers. I don't know if he has been, but he seems like he's been fine.
Yeah.
But so once Duncan's able to shoot, they can kind of figure out the half-court offense because he's such a big part of it. But for now, they should probably just continue to pick up the pace. And it's been working out. Obviously, you have Jimmy Butler able to play free safety like he's the best in the league at doing. So they're going to get the deflections, going to get the steals. Just take advantage of it.
So for me, Brian, and I, Siobhan and I got into it on the timeline as we do often. Sometimes in private, sometimes on the time. Siobhan and I think of the game really differently, which makes it fun. But, her and I were kind of talking about like just our concerns with the Heat. And for me, it's always been like, okay, I'm confident that they're going to have a top 4 defense. Like I feel pretty good about that. And I feel even better about that.
Absolutely. When healthy, absolutely.
Yeah. And when Depot comes back, I mean, they're just going to have even better. But their offense was going to be like, I'm concerned about their offense going into the season. My thing was, and I'm not, by the way, chat, I'm not concerned about their offense. Like I'm just looking ahead. You know what I mean? Because again, like I said, they're third in offense. You know what I mean? They're playing good, right? Their defense is obviously incredible. They're playing good. They've had a really rough schedule, right? They've played a lot of the best teams in the league. And right now they're going on a really rough road trip, and it's like 5 games in 8 nights. So it's going to be tough. And that Lakers-Clippers back-to-back is brutal. Clippers have been playing a lot better. Their defense is incredible. They switch a ton, which is going to be kind of tough for Miami. So, all that being said, they're playing really great. But Brian, I guess, with the shooting not so good, with the pace, when you don't have shooting, the way that you leverage space is you play fast. You get the ball out quick so that you can play in even, because that's how you artificially create space. If you're pounding the ball in half court, guys can help off non-shooters, all that. When you play in transition, all of a sudden that help is not existent. So you let your best players, play in the open court. By the way, Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry both shooting career best from at the rim this season. Kyle at 75%, has not been over 60 in forever, and Jimmy at 67%. So these dudes are just getting to the bat. When they get to the basket, they're being hyper efficient. They just don't get to the rim too much. But I mean, I think, Brian, their pace has to hold unless their shooting improves.
So I guess, are you more concerned about the 3-point shooting in general, or are you just talking more about like outside the paint area? Because I feel like Bam has tried to take more mid-range jumpers lately. Tyler has, I guess, within 2 of his last 3 games, he's had 2 of his worst games so far this season, and I felt like a lot of that has been a lot of these teams have been starting to double him, so he's not been able to get to the same spots like in the Utah game where they were pretty much playing drop the entire time. He was able to. He was basically able to tear them up, especially in that 4th quarter run where they almost gave up the lead. But I mean, if you want to take a look, it feels like the Heat, when they're winning games, they're blowing teams out, and when they're losing games, they're also getting blown out. So it's kind of hard to figure out which one of those 2 teams Miami really is. Are they somewhere down the middle? Because it's hard to like evaluate this team. Like, sure, it's 10 games, they're 7-3, but at the same point, like, from what we've seen, they look dominant against a lot of these good teams. I mean, they beat Utah, who I think is probably going to be, if not the Western Conference champion, they'll probably be at least in the finals for the Western Conference.
Have been really good.
Yeah, them and the Warriors have pretty much been the top 2 teams in that conference. And for the most part, that game, they played excellent up until that last 4-minute stretch. I mean, they've had great games. It's just like these last couple games, really the Celtics game and this game have been the 2 games that you look at, because obviously the first game they lost was without Lowry. Like, you look at these 2 games and what were the 2 things that happened to the Heat that made them lose this game? It really was, 1, Boston being able to switch so much around the perimeter. It kind of confused Miami on offense, and it really took them out of rhythm throughout the entire game. They weren't able to make anything. They only had 33 points in like the first half. Crazy. And I felt like in this past game, they started to turn over the ball way too much. They were probably overpassing more than they should have. Jimmy was kind of reverting back to a lot of the stuff that he was doing last season, where he was pretty much taking every single shot just to keep the offense afloat. Obviously, when that happens, and pretty much what we saw a lot of last year, they didn't win many of those games. They were pretty much a 500 team when Jimmy was, trying to be a hero.
So they only had 13 turnovers yesterday. So I don't think that was too much of an issue.
But it started off like that.
It was the rebounding to me. I mean,
the rebounding, absolutely. But that also leads to the point where, like, yeah, you miss your shots and you're going to miss those rebounds too. And it also lets Denver get out on the break.
And you can't get out on the break if you're not if you're not defensive. And the Heat, by the way, they're the 4th or the 5th best offensive rebounding team in the league this season. When that was their 4th best offensive rebounding team, they were 29th last season. So they turned their biggest weakness into one of their best strengths.
Now, one thing I will say about last night's game that pretty much concerned me the most of anything was it was kind of like the first real test that they've had maybe since the Indy game where they played against a pretty good front court. Like Jokic is great. He's obviously MVP talent. He's pretty much one of the best centers in this league. So I was very interested to see how they would, match up against Jokic with their front court because in a way their front court is pretty small, even though I love PJ and I love Bam as a tandem currently right now. So to me, they kind of failed the test. I felt like Bam really did get outplayed for most of that game. He didn't really stand his own. And honestly kind of showed in the rebounding battle, even though obviously like we've been talking about the officiating and how pretty bad it was. You kind of wanted to see more out of Bam in that game to kind of just even that matchup. Like he didn't really show that he was an all-star. It pretty much was a difference between an MVP player playing at a superstar level and then an all-star who has a bad night.
So their defense, I think, like yesterday was a failure of their defense more than anything. The rebounding and everything, like that's I think as bad as they've looked, and we can get into the point you made about the Celtics switching, because I do think there's something to be said there. I mean, Bam 10 and 10, 3 of 10 from the field. Like you said, just not really good enough for him, and he is battling the knee thing too. And I think that when he's looked this, you know what I mean. So that's something to be said. The switching, so they did a lot of front and recover, Kenny, which has kind of been the Eric Spoelstra MO since he got here, right? When they play bigger teams, I mean, unless even when Hassan has been here, frankly, it's been front, help, recover, rotate. Right. And that's how they played. And last season, it was incredible. I don't really think that works against Jokic because he's such a good passer. I think when you play a guy like Embiid, yeah, right. Like you can get away with it against Embiid. Jokic, it gets harder because he'll kill you. And the fronting, if he just gets behind your defense, you're cooked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the thing about it, if you've seen me on High, I genuinely, even if I weren't a Heat fan, they would be my pick to win the championship. I've been vocal about that. But the only team that really concerns me is Denver. And that's because as great as the Heat's defense is, against a guy like Jokic with that kind of vision and that kind of skill, if you do block the passing lane off, if you make any tiny defensive mistake, he'll make you pay for it with his passing. Or scoring. So he concerns me. And so I'm not really using last night's game as a measuring stick because he's just a different level of talent. So if they run into Denver in the finals, I'll be concerned. But there's not much to take away from this because as much as I don't want to give him credit right now for obvious reasons, he's just such an incredible player. You just can't really.
And we're only 10 games in. So, all these numbers and everything that we're talking about is going to fluctuate. But I think I think what the point you made is good. And they're not equipped to do that. And part of that is size. You know what I mean? I mean, but even when Dedmon is matched up against Jokic, there's not much you can do.
You have to be so perfect against him.
Yeah. And even if they're injured, they have a lot of motion. And I think that these teams that have a ton of motion, it's gonna be hard against Miami, who they don't really have the best athletes, right? And they're a little thin with injury right now, and they're just thin in general. I think Oladipo helps you. He becomes one of your probably the most athletic guy on your team, other than Bam. When you can add that element of him on your defense, that's going to help you a ton. But when they do a lot of their motion handoffs, back screening, cutting, a lot of those hammer screens, while Jokic is on the block on the other side. It gets tough for PJ to constantly chase these dudes around, be switching on the perimeter. I do want to get into what Brian said about the Celtic game because we're at the 10 game mark. They're 7-3. They're really good. All their metrics are amazing. They're by all accounts one of the 3 best teams in the league with Utah and the Warriors. That Celtic game was alarming for a different reason than the Denver game was. And I think we kind of went over what we feel about the Denver game. Brian, in that Celtic game, this kind of goes back to Miami's weaknesses last season where over switching kind of killed them. And really the way that you attack that is you mismatch hunt. And they still don't have a dude who can pick on a mismatch. Bam, I don't know if he's there yet. Sometimes he shows it, sometimes he doesn't. Shooting 37% from mid-range this season, not necessarily good enough. His true shooting has gone down. Bam has looked really good. A lot of his offensive numbers have gone down. I think part of that is he's less of a roller this season. And I think ultimately this is going to be a net positive for him because he's going to be able to diversify his scoring. And when the rubber hits the road, they can put him in spread pick and roll and everything will be fine. But when teams switch your actions and you can't create space and you're not getting guys in a drop or whatever, now you're really depending on Tyler, who can't create separation against a lot of people as good as he's played. A guy like Jimmy, who I think Jimmy's mismatch hunting since the bubble has really disappeared. That's one of the things that I think made them strong in the bubble, where he would find a matchup that he liked and attack that dude. I just don't think that he has that so much anymore. I think in the playoffs last season, you kind of saw a little bit of that. And I think in this season, in that Pacer game, you saw some of that. I just don't think that he's going to be that kind of guy anymore, going forward. And that's fine. But, they're going to have to do something about solving these switches. And like I said, they have the Clippers coming up on Thursday. The Lakers drop. So, I think they'll be more in their comfort zone. But when against the Clippers, who have a good defense this year and who switch everything, that's where I think is going to be, it could get ugly.
And so going into like the Celtic game, there's an alternative to the mismatch hunting. It's a little more complicated, but in the second half of that Celtic game, they started to go to Bam on the pick and roll a little bit. And it's also a good way to beat a switch is to slip on the pick and roll.
Shout out to Nikias.
Yep. And so, and that was working. And then they just stopped going to it for some reason. And the thing you have to remember about Bam is he came into the league as a roller. And so that's probably what he's the most comfortable with, even though he has improved and he is a great playmaker now. He's able to create for himself when he feels like it. But I like to see them go back to that a little more against teams that switch off often and just see how it works. It was working against the Celtics and they stopped. So I want to see them try to go to that a little more.
So last season, Bam was one of the best pick and roll bigs in the league. 1.03 points per possession. About 20% of his plays were as a roll man and pick and roll. I mean, if you're getting over a point per possession on that, you're doing really good, right? And that's this season. Jimmy, by the way, Jimmy is literally one of the most destructive roll men in the league. He's second after Miles Turner right now. Just right now already, 1.6 points per possession as a roll man and pick and roll. Last year, he was almost at 2 points per possession. I mean, and they're using him a lot more as a roll man with Kyle, which is just part of that has been the evolution of his game. Jimmy as a roll man, he's just so smart and he just rolls with such a force. But you look at a guy like Bam, who that's kind of his best skill. Bam's best skill is being a roller. That rolling and passing, I think are really what he's elite at. So last season he was 1.32 points per possession. Really good. So I want to see a little bit more of him as a roller. I think to the point that you made, when they played the Celtics in the bubble, that playoff series really turned when they went to Bam in the role. By the way, he was in the 85th percentile last season. Just legit one of the best at that in the league. And when the Celtics, who are a little smaller in the back line, the Clippers as well, I think that the way, the way, like you said, you kind of slip those, attack that, run it a little quicker, which I think Kyle is good at. So I'm going to be interested to see how they kind of approach that, especially, but he might not even play because of the knee. So it's kind of hard to tell.
And to your point also about Bam's passing, that's something he improved on in the league as time went on, as at the same time they stopped going to him less on the pick and roll. And so now when they do that, when he does slip and it creates the 2-on-1 it's supposed to create, now you have Bam as an elite passer and you have PJ in the corner now instead of Iguodala.
They didn't
so
use
that's
Bam.
Another way. Yeah.
Bless.
So that's another way you could exploit it. It's just a matter of how much they want to go to it.
Go ahead. B.
I'm still kind of like there's still parts of Bam's game we haven't seen that much this season. I think part of the stuff that we saw in the Olympics that I kind of want Spo to kind of explore, but more is using Bam more as a short roller passer. We haven't really seen a lot of that this season. And I feel like that's a part of his game. Like, he hasn't had many assist numbers, but that's an easy way to get him involved in both the short roll and also playmaking at the same time rather than just doing dribble handoffs.
But I think the short roll just comes with how they're defending it. Like, if that help rotates, he's ready. Like, so if they're running pick and roll, and if, PJ's man in the corner is pre-rotating to help, right? Then Bam, but they're just not doing it. They're either kind of doing a short stunt, or they're sticking with the man in the corner. Miami also they're doing a lot of empty side stuff, which to me is like probably their best stuff even this year and last year, where they're screening with an empty side. So that help can't come. They're just like literally forcing that help out. And if the help does come, it's like directly in Bam's eyesight. So they're just not going to give up the open three. So they're just going to try to contest with the dudes that they have there and already under the basket.
I guess in a way, I just want to try to figure out a different way than just putting him in a horn set.
No, I mean they run some of their old stuff from last season when it's just Jimmy and Bam and no Kyle. I do think that they're making a concerted effort to getting him the ball in the mid post, and I do think that he finds Jimmy and he finds cutters. They move a lot on offense. I just think that guys stay home on shooters, and for as rough as Duncan has been as a shooter, and I've covered this in those little videos that I tweet, he's still defended as an elite shooter. So, when he cuts, that man doesn't help off of him, right? They stay with him. So Duncan is kind of, like how a quarterback is motioning the receivers and they're like kind of shifting. Duncan's doing a lot of that for them, even if he's not shooting well, because nobody wants it to be the night that he wakes up on them. And he kind of woke up a little bit yesterday, but so I think the way that they're defended is a little different. And I just think Bam is kind of being put into more of a, score or die situation. Like that's kind of what it is. So the assist numbers may be down, but that to me doesn't indicate, because when he needs to play make, he will, right? When he starts becoming a more reliable scorer for Miami, people will start helping quicker. And if PJ's not shooting the ball as well, they'll be cheating like they did against Andre, and then Bam will have that pass or that 1-2 swing, right? So not too worried about it, but certainly something to keep an eye on. Wanted to get to a couple things before we close out the show. So we talked a little bit about Duncan now. Kenny, something I've been monitoring are the Duncan Tyler lineups because they've historically not been good. This season they started off good, and now look at that. We're fine. The Heat don't have a lot of negative two-man units that have high minutes. Duncan Tyler is one of them, -4 per 100 possessions, 116 defensive rating, 112 offensive rating. Just really not good on either end. That they play a lot. They're at 127 minutes together. That's almost as many minutes as Duncan has played without Tyler. That doesn't seem to work. And I know that they've tried it with different things, whether it's with Jimmy, whether it's with Markieff and Dedmon, whether it's with Bam and Kyle. I just really think that they either have to figure that out or they just can't go to that anymore, unless Duncan's going to remember how to shoot at an elite level.
Just looking at Duncan's number the last 4 games, by the way, he's shooting 8 attempts a game. He's shooting 38% pretty much.
Yeah, so he's climbing back up to who he is.
So
he'll eventually get there.
I'm not worried about him. Good shooters
are
made. Good shooters will figure it out.
And so, as far as him and Tyler together, it's just a little weird to have to get used to it because Tyler is a capable playmaker, but Duncan, he needs somebody who's going to find him because obviously he's not a guy you want creating for himself. And Tyler is the exact guy you want creating for himself. And so Tyler's job is to come into the game, get shots up. I don't care about your percentage. If you don't shoot, that's when you come out. And so it's a little weird for Duncan, who needs people to set him up. So I understand that lineup not being too great. They're going to have to just figure it out.
His last 5 games, he's shooting 40.5% on 8.4 attempts.
Duncan?
Yes.
He's shooting 34 on the season. He'll be back. I'm not worried about it. By the way, speaking of your Tyler point, Tyler shooting.
I'm more concerned about Kyle Lowry, man. What was that last game? We haven't even talked about how bad that was.
Why are we gotta talk about Kyle? We're talking about other people now. So, if we look at Tyler, he's only shooting 48% at the rim, which has kind of been he shot 62% last year, which is really, really good. That might be a career high for him. I don't know if he'll ever get to that. he's just not big enough, doesn't have the length, doesn't create separation. That's why he doesn't get to the free throw line, where he makes his damage, obviously, from three and the mid-range, shooting 40% from three, 51% from mid-range. And another number that I'm going to monitor all season is what he looks on the pull-up, right? Because last season, before really the team exploded with COVID, that was basically his new tool, that little pull-up mid-range jumper.
What he's most comfortable with.
Yeah. Yeah, people want me to talk about Kyle. We're not going to do that. So
can we talk about, is there a way for you to look up, because I'm really curious, because we have barely seen it a lot this season, even though the last 2 seasons the Heat's offense was pretty much dribble handoff. What is Duncan's dribble handoff numbers looking like for the season? Like,
so
is his point per possession even close to the like James Harden level that he was the last 2 seasons?
That was a synergy number that we can't pull up like individual players on DHOs. Well, maybe we can. Let me see.
Well,
I think we can.
In the meantime, Kenny, let's talk about how bad. Kenny, talk about how bad Lowry is.
So Tyler, by the way, is at 1.2 points per possession on the handoff. So if we want Tyler, yeah, these are provided by Synergy. So if we want the Tyler things, I will say that Miami has taken a lot fewer handoff possessions than last year. Which is a result of Kyle and a little bit more steady pick and roll. So Duncan this season is at 1 point per possession. That is the 62nd percentile. Tyler is at the 94th percentile in handoffs.
Why can't we have both of them in the 90th percent? Imagine if both of them were like that. Plus, isn't Kyle like one of the best too? We haven't even seen Kyle shoot that many dribble handoffs either.
They don't have him, and that last year, by the way, Duncan was 1.37 points per possession, 97th percentile. So Duncan was literally I'm sorry. No, Duncan was 1.06, 72nd percentile on handoffs last season. But they don't run Kyle off as many handoffs as Toronto did, which has been surprising. And I guess because when they triggered the set, they used Duncan flying off, not Kyle. And they usually have Kyle screen in those sets and then get the ball back.
There's another reason why they don't do it as much. It takes fucking forever to get a fucking dribble handoff like set going. Like by the time they get even just one pass through that set, like it's pretty much 10, 15 seconds off the shot clock. So that's part of the reason. Like that's why the pace is a little bit faster now, because they're not doing as many.
So last season, obviously the Heat were the dribble handoff masters. This season, they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They're 13th in handoff frequency, as opposed to last season where they were first. So, fewer handoffs, more pick and rolls, more isolations, more kind of different things.
Which is good. It's good to have a diet in the offense that's like spread out with so many different types of creations that they could go to. But at the same time, that was a really good set that they could go to at least during certain points of the game. I'm not saying they need to run this shit 90% of the time in the game, but maybe run it like 3 or 4 more times during the course of the game.
They have to find a balance, because a big reason for it, why it was so frequent in the past couple of years, because obviously didn't have anybody who can run a pick and roll really,
or dribble for that matter. Kenny,
if get into the paint.
If Kendrick ran a pick and roll, he was shooting that pull up 100% of the time. And so now you have Kyle, who's obviously better at making decisions. So that dribble handoff number is going to go down. But they, like Brian said, they shouldn't go completely away from it. So they can figure that out. Get Kyle involved in them. He was a really good dribble handoff shooter last season in Toronto. I'm not sure how much he played in Toronto last season, but so they'll figure it out. We also know Spo is a mad scientist. So they're probably drilling that to death in practice and just saving it for a certain team or a certain situation.
Yeah, I could see that happening, especially against a switching team. Like that could help against a switching team.
Miami still doesn't get to the rim with the frequency that they should, right? And I think Oladipo is going to help them a little bit with that. But, they do run handoffs with Duncan. So in the beginning of the season, they weren't really running any of it. And I don't know if you've noticed, guys, last season and the year before, they'd really opened the game with like a Duncan handoff set. And that really stopped this season. And recently they've been doing it again to get him going. And as Brian said, those numbers would indicate that works.
Last 5 games, he's shooting 40.5% on 9 attempts, pretty much.
So that's who he is, right? And if you get my guy going early, I think that helps. The other thing with Duncan is, he has to do more of like his relocation to the corner stuff. So
yeah, he hasn't done that a lot.
They've done a little bit. So what they'll do is, PJ will set a hammer screen for Duncan. If you don't know what a hammer screen is, it's just kind of a screen on the weak side of the ball, where the shooter kind of comes out to sprints to the corner, and then kind of the corner man screens for that shooter. So, kind of the guy goes into space with the screen while the action is happening on the other side of the court. So a lot of times what they'll do is Kyle and Bam will run a pick and roll, and then they'll set a hammer screen on the other side of the court, kind of get Duncan open. They've done a little bit more of that. So I like that they're kind of incorporating stuff like that. I know Siobhan pointed out the other day that they were running kind of some elevator stuff for Duncan. So it has been something that the coaching staff has gone out of their way to kind of help. But I don't think this team is going to be like a high efficiency. Like, they're not going to get to the rim a ton, unless it's off offensive rebounds, right? They're just not going to pound the ball up top and burrow into the rim. They're getting free throws, which is good. I know that their number has dipped a little bit. So like some stuff is trending weird. They're treading water. I really think when we check back in another 10 games, we're going to have a lot more clarity on like what their stuff is. Also, their schedule's been weird, right? They've played a really hard schedule and a lot of different defenses. So that's stuff. So I don't know.
Looking at the next 10 games, pretty much let's because it does get a lot. It's pretty much easier after this weekend. Pretty much they'll be.
Heat are top 10 in free throw attempts, by the way, which is just incredible considering.
It's mostly because of Jimmy. Jimmy's second in the league right now, pretty much.
They're third, by the way, in free throw attempts per 100 possessions. So when you adjust for pace, Miami's third behind Houston and Utah. So Miami has really corrected the turnover issue, where they're kind of middle in the pack in turnover, and they get to the free throw line a bunch, and they're second in free throw shooting, which is good because last year they also kind of struggled with that a little bit. So they're offensive rebounding like to an elite level. They're getting a lot of free throws, and they're not turning over the ball as much. And part of that is Kyle. And I know that Sean over at 5 Reasons tweeted out that Kyle is like like 20% turnover or something like that. But that's early in the season because they're not he's still kind of figuring stuff out with the new team and everything. So it's not totally fair to him, but. What were you saying, Brian?
I'm just looking ahead to their schedule. So pretty much throughout this entire month, they play obviously the back-to-back tomorrow against the Lakers and then against the Clippers. Then they go and play the Jazz away. Next game that they play is on Monday. They start playing the Thunder. That should be an easier game for them to play after this next 3.
Can be a trap game, but it could be easy.
Yeah, they play the Pelicans right after that. They're pretty much one of the worst teams in the league.
Shy's good, man. SGA is good.
Yeah, Tyler Butler. Yeah, then they play the Wizards twice, and then after that they play the Pistons. Like, come on, man. At a point, like those sample sizes are gonna still pretty much look good. I think. Like, I think they'll still be a top 4 or 5 offensive rating team. The defense should go back down. I'm a little surprised that they've given up so much these last 2 games, but obviously, like, you can't hold a 98 defensive rating forever. That's unrealistic. But I do imagine that their defensive rating will also go back down.
I mean, their defense is still good. You know what I mean?
Like, yeah, but I mean, it went up a lot because of these last 2 games.
I mean, they're only 6th, and they're like 0.5 away from being 4th. You know what I mean? Like. Golden State has the best defense. I think it'll even out. I'm not too concerned. And again, like some of these have been that Celtic game kind of threw everything into whack, right? And again, we're only 10 games in, so like a couple small samples really.
Well, they held the Celtics under 100.
Did they?
Yeah, they did. They held the Celtics under 100.
It was so drunk.
It was the Jazz game, and then this past game against the Nuggets where they gave up like over 110 points. I don't know if anybody noticed, but I was pretty much off heat all last week. I came on.
I was pretty fucked up when I had that rant. I've been on a bender all week. Yesterday was the first sober day I've had in a week. Woof.
Taking hangover time to like way too literally.
All right. What do you think, Kenny?
So I actually do want to go back to 2 points really quick.
Let's go.
And so as far as the offense, that's going to go back up because obviously, like we said, Duncan, he's not the main guy that Goins, but he's still so important to the offense. And the thing that let me know they're really making sure he gets back involved is, if you remember at the end of that Celtics game, they had him in with the third unit at the end of it, just to kind of let him get his shots up, let him run a couple things, get a little comfortable in a game that was already decided. And so I feel good about his comfort level and getting his shot back. We've seen since then he's kind of climbing back up. And another thing is the offensive rebounding. We talk about Bam being able to rebound on defense because he's not a three-point line anymore, switching. But we don't really discuss how he's not over there on offense either, because he's running the dribble handoffs, and then Duncan's firing a shot off, he's not in position. And so that's going to continue, I think. As long as they keep running the offense they're running, sort of, that's going to continue, and Duncan's going to find his shot, obviously. They're making the effort for him to find his shot. And so these numbers that drop, they're going to go back up.
Dedmon is also a huge reason why their offensive rebounding a lot better. And by the
100%.
way, Dwayne Dedman
Mechanic.
still the mechanic, Mr. Dedman, still net rating king. Plus,
We didn't even get to talk about that. Like, I mean, we talked about it a little bit on Hangover Time, but we haven't talked about it as an MHB pod. How cool is that to see Tyler post that on his
That was
Instagram
great.
stream?
Well, the Twitter account did that. I feel like the broadcast is next. Eric Reed, I know Eric Reed has to be a big fan of this, of course. Eric, you gotta slip in a mechanic in there. Dwayne Dedman likes it. Tyler's into
merch.
it.
They said Justice better on air, so this
They
is gonna
did.
catch on at some point.
Kenny, do you know how proud we were of that moment?
I remember. I've been following
Shit
the show
was-
for a long time.
I love you,
And then
man.
he-
That shit,
and then he-
that was good. I love when Heat players get involved with our little stupid bits. Joss was it like Solomon Hill in the anime. That was fucking fun. Justice. Hearing the Justice Better song. Brass played it for Justice in the locker room. Justice would literally laugh at a line and like tap Jay Rich next to him. Was like, "Did you hear that? Did you hear that?" I don't know. The players on this team have always been really fun and great to us, so we love that. I guess we got to talk about. I guess Kyle didn't have the. I'm not even gonna say didn't have the best game, but maybe Kyle didn't meet expectations. Who wants to talk about that?
It's not going to happen.
Oh, would you look at the time? Show's over.